What happens when a curious girl meets a giant whale under the moon? Let's paint their story. So the first step is we're going to mix a really beautiful dark navy blue. So what I have here is a little bit of phthalo blue, and I'm going to add about, I would say, 4 parts phthalo blue to 1 part black. And then I'm going to grab some on my 1/2 inch flat brush, and I'm going to apply it to the top third of my canvas. And that's going to be our horizon line, right about there. There we go. And you can also apply, if you like to paint the sides of your canvas while you're painting, you can go ahead and apply that paint on the sides of your canvas as well. All right, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab that same midnight blue on the same brush, and we're gonna apply it to the bottom of our canvas. And this is gonna be the bottom of our ocean. So the bottom of our ocean is gonna be nice and dark. And again, you can paint the sides of your canvas as you go. So once you've covered the bottom part of the canvas with that navy, we're going to grab a little bit of white, and we're gonna lighten that mix just a little bit. And then once you've lightened it, we're going to apply it right above that navy. And then we're gonna blend a bit. And then we're gonna keep on picking up a little bit of white as we go up the canvas. And that's gonna create a nice, beautiful gradient. So it's gonna be darker at the bottom, and it's gonna be lightest at the top at the horizon. Keep on picking up that white paint. And I'm just gonna lighten it just a little bit by adding a little bit more white at the top, because I want it to be a gradient. And then once you're happy with your ocean water, we're gonna let this dry and then move on to the next step. All right, once your canvas is nice and dry, we're going to fill in our moon shape. So for the moon, you have a couple of options here. You can use the free stencil to transfer the design right onto your canvas, and I'm gonna leave a link in the description below for this free stencil. Or you can just take a simple object around your home that's circular, and then you're gonna center it, and then just trace it with a pencil, like that. And now I'm just taking my medium round brush and some pure white paint, and I'm just gonna fill in that moon. So I'm adding my brush strokes in kind of different directions, and that's totally fine. So while the moon is still wet, we're gonna add some craters on that moon. So I'm going to grab a little bit of white and then a little bit of black, just a smidgen of it, and then mix it in. We want kind of like a medium gray. So I'm gonna add a little bit of black. So I would say this mix is about 4 parts white to 1 part black. And then once you have that gray, your option here is to just add craters at whim. But you can also, if you want to make it more realistic, you can take a real picture of the moon, which I'm also going to leave a link in the description for this picture. And you can kind of use these craters on the moon as guidelines as to where the craters on the moon go. And I actually have a full tutorial on how to create a realistic moon, which I'll leave up above. So I'm going to use the gray to create a crater right about here. And we want that white and that gray to mix. So that's why we're not waiting for that white to dry below. Then I'm gonna add there. So they're just different shaped craters that we're adding here. And I'm gonna add a little bit more white to my paintbrush so I can blend it with the background a bit. It gives it a little bit more interest and definition when it's blended. that. And I'm going to create an even lighter gray, adding more white. And we're going to keep on blending and adding different shades of gray to this moon. So we have a variety of different craters going on. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of that darker gray and add some darker details there. I'm going to add some white dots too, just to give it a little bit more extra detail. And then when you're happy with the moon, you're going to let that dry, and then we'll move on to the next step. To crispen this moon and bring it more to life, I'm going to grab my detailing brush and some pure white paint, and I'm just going to trace the outline with some white paint. And this is going to make the moon look like it's glowing. And now we're going to continue with that white. I'm going to take some white and some water, and I'm going to thin it down so it's nice and fluid. And then I'm going to take that fluid white paint on my brush, and we're going to create some small waves right at the top of our ocean. And it can be kind of broken up. It doesn't have to be like one big chunk of wave. They can be kind of staggered, because in further steps we're going to add in the girl in her boat right around here, and there's going to be some waves that are kind of crashing against the side of the boat. And the waves will kind of help the eye to understand that this is like the surface of the water. Some could be thicker too. Some thicker waves, some thinner waves. Variety in artwork really kind of help make it more interesting. Okay, perfect. All right, for the next step, I've gone ahead and traced in my whale and my girl and boat with a piece of carbon transfer paper. So now I'm going to focus on the whale. So to start out with, we're going to create a similar like dark navy color like we did for the sky. So I'm going to grab, I would say, 4 parts of this phthalo blue to 1 part black. And I'm using my round brush here, my medium round brush. I'm going to load that color up, and then I'm just going to paint the top side of my whale. So basically everywhere where we don't have those stripes. So I'll show you in my sketch. So we're basically going to focus on painting the whale, the top side of the whale here, and some of the fin as well. Now we're going to clean off our brush, and we're going to grab some white paint in another pile, and a little bit like that. We don't need too much, and I'm going to grab just a little tiny bit of blue on my paintbrush and mix it in so it's like a really pale blue. Once you have that color, we're going to paint in the bottom part of our whale, so basically like below the mouth, I guess the chin area. Then we'll come back in the next step and add those lines. And then below the belly, that. And then on the fins, we're going to add it at the top of the fin and then blend with that paint that's kind of still wet. So in the middle, it's going to blend. The white and that dark blue is going to blend, and you can add a couple of strokes even on that dark blue. And then we're going to do the same thing on this fin over here. So we're going to fill it out with that light blue, and then we're just going to blend in the middle. Blend it like that. And if you want to bring some of that dark blue back, you can do that as well. Or you can even wait for it to dry to get A nice look like that. And then what I like to do as well is I like to bring a little bit more blue into my light blue. And then I'll add, and I'll grab just a little bit on the edge of my brush. I don't want too much paint on it, just like a little bit. And I'll add kind of like streaks like that on the back of my whale, just to give it a little bit more detail and movement to the skin. This brings a little bit more to life, even the fins down here. And again, I don't have too much paint. The key with this technique is you want very little paint and you want your brush to be fairly dry. It's kind of like dry brushing here where the paint is just kind of sitting on top in really scratchy strokes. Like that. All right, we're going to wait for this to dry now, and then we're gonna come back in the next step. All right, now once our whale is nice and dry, we're gonna add some black details to it. So I have my thin detailing brush here, and I'm gonna grab a little bit of black in another pile, and I'm gonna thin it down with water. I want it to be nice and fluid when it's on my brush because it's gonna be much easier to control and get those fine details. So I added just a few drops of that water in, and then I'm gonna load up my brush, and what we're gonna do is we're going to create lines going down our whale like that. Once you're happy with that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna stay with that black paint, and then we're gonna add a couple of dots of that black paint in between where that white meets that dark blue, just to give a little bit more texture to the skin. And then we're gonna do the same thing on this fin here. Add a couple of dabs, dots. And if you find like it's too harsh, you can always just take a piece of Kleenex paper or paper towel and just dab it. So it's a little bit softer. Kind of blends it in a little bit more once you dab it away. We're going to take that black paint again, and we're going to create the eye of our whale. And the eye of our whale is going to be like in the center of where that top part kind of dips right there. So we're going to add just a nice circle, a black circle, and then we're going to add a nice pop of white in a later step once that's dry. So I'm going to grab my medium round brush here, and we're going to stay with that black paint, and we're going to create these kind of like water canyons, rock, like underwater mountains on the sides of our canvas. Going to be kind of coming down like that, and they're kind of jaggedy, they're not so smooth, so you can let your brush kind of dance on the canvas like that. And then we're just going to fill it in with that black. We're going to do the same thing on the other side too. So we're going to create another kind of underwater mountain rock. Try to let my brush kind of dance a bit. So while the paint is still wet, I'm going to grab a little bit of that black, and I'm going to add a little bit of white into it, so it becomes kind of like a gray, a dark gray, like a charcoal gray. And we're going to add some rocks, some highlights on this mountain face, and they can just be dabs here and there. It doesn't have to make too much sense, because to the eye it's going to see a little bit of texture, and that's all we really want. And you can always add a little bit more if you want to add a little bit more of that black back. You can layer on top. That's a beauty with acrylics. Layering is key. And also it helps with mistakes too. You can fix things right up. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to switch over to smaller round brush. And I'm going to grab a little bit of that black. I'm going to add some coral plants that are kind of poking out from the bottom of the sea, the ocean or the sea, kind of flowing in the water too. They kind of look like tridents a bit. So if you can imagine that shape, it's easier to just paint them in. Ready, now what we're gonna do is we're going to grab our detailing brush and we're gonna grab a little bit of white paint. And we're gonna thin it down so it's nice and fluid, because we want it to be actually a little bit transparent too for the jellyfish. So we want to add a little bit extra water here to make it extra transparent. So I've already pre-traced them with the stencil to make it a little bit easier, but jellyfish are super easy. It's basically just like a dome, and it's kind of bumpy at the bottom. And then I'm going to add in, then they're kind of segmented. So the lines like that downwards. And then the middle of the jellyfish are these like thick curly strands that kind of wave down. So I'm going to create 2 of these kind of curly wavy strands going down. And then, so the center strands of a jellyfish are nice and thick and have a lot of movement. And then the ones on the, and they're longer too. And the ones on the outer edge are more like loose and flowy like that, and a little bit shorter. So we're just gonna add a few, flowing down, flowing out. So that's one jellyfish there, and then we're going to add another one over here. All right, so the next step is we're going to finish off the whale's eyes. So I have a white paint marker, and it's just gonna help me get a really fine detail. But if you don't have a paint marker, you can use a detailing brush with some thinned down white paint. So what I'm gonna do to finish off the eye is I'm just gonna add a small crescent at the bottom part of the eye like that. So the eye looks like it's looking right up at that girl in a very curious and friendly way. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some fish silhouettes to the bottom of our ocean. So I have my detailing brush here, and I'm gonna grab some black paint on it, and we're just going to paint simple fish silhouettes. So I trace them with my printable, but if you don't have the printable, then basically you just wanna trace an oval, a sideways oval like that, and then the fin at the back. And then you're going to paint the fin on top and the fin on the bottom. And that's a simple fish shape. Alrighty, for the next step, I'm going to continue with this paint marker, and we're going to create some water bubbles. Some small ones, some bigger ones. Sorry, I think these are called air bubbles. So we're going to create a few of them here and there. Alright, so now we're going to work on the girl and her boat. So I have a little bit of burnt umber or any brown on my paint palette. So I'm just gonna take my medium round brush and a little bit of that burnt umber or any brown, and I'm just gonna paint in the girl's boat, that brown. So the boat shape is super simple. It's straight at the top, a little bit curved going upwards at the ends, and then it's just an angle on both sides like that. And then again, it's kind of rounded at the bottom. That's floating in the water. So that's the boat. We're gonna wait for that to dry. And while that dries, we're going to add in the sail and the pole. So for the pole, I'm gonna switch over to my detailing brush and I'm gonna grab some black paint. And it's basically going to be just gonna thin down that black paint. Just a little bit with water so it's nice and fluid. And the pole is just a straight line down like that. And then for the sail, I like to outline it in black just to see it. Oops, had a little bit too much water on my brush. I'm gonna outline it. So it's just gonna be like a triangle shape. And like that. So there's going to be a little bit of a space between the pole and the sail because it's kind of blowing a little bit in the wind. I'm just going to fill it in with that black, and then we're going to layer on top with the white, but the black is going to give us a little bit of shadow to work with. We are going to work on the girl. So we're going to start off with her face and her arm. So we're going to create a skin color. So I'm going to move a little bit of that brown over in another pile. I'm going to grab a little bit of white. And we're going to create a brown color, a little bit lighter brown. And you can choose here what tone of skin color you want to paint. There we go. And then I have my detailing brush here. And I'm going to fill in her face. And I want her hand kind of almost touching the whale. Like maybe like an inch or two away. It's like the first time they're meeting. They're both very curious about each other. Alrighty. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to paint in her hair. So her hair, we're going to do this brown color over here. So we're just going to paint in kind of strands. And then we can add in a little bit. So we can add in variations of this brown by adding white into it to give us some highlights. And also some black into the brown as well to give us a little bit of shadow. And we'll wait for that to dry and then we can add another layer. Now for the dress, you can pick any color you'd like for her dress. So I wanted to use this beautiful green color. So I'm going to fill that out. All right, so the next step is we're gonna finish off the sail over here. So I have my medium round brush and I'm gonna grab some white paint on it and we're just gonna go over that sail, that white paint, and we're gonna try to keep that black border just to give our sail a little bit of definition against that moon in the background. And alternatively too, you can paint the sail like any color. So if you don't want to paint it white and you want to paint it a different color, you can go ahead and do that as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add some stars into our night sky. So I'm just going to use my paint pen here, but you can also go ahead and use some white paint and your detailing brush. For another easy underwater scene to paint, check out the sea turtle tutorial right over here. And as always, sending you lots of peace, love, and color your way.